experience design. I think it's one of the least valued and most important aspects of software development, and so that's what I'm talking about today. This is just a high-level outline, and as funny as it may seem, this is as much for me today as it is for you guys, just to make sure that we stay on topic, even as we potentially diverge, answer questions. Good user experience design takes complicated processes and makes them seem deceptively simple. So Apple does this very well. I can't help it, I'm an Apple fanboy, but what they do is they took, for example, the music industry and made it something that everyone's grandma could practically do, loading songs onto their MP3 player. They did it with tablets. I mean, that could have been done very, very differently by another manufacturer. And so at its source, a good user experience designer is looking at taking an approach to software development and putting themselves into the shoes of the end user, not in the shoes of the developer. And it means dumbing it down. And I don't mean that as any disrespect to the end user, but no one's going to understand your product as well as you do. You really need to take a step back, look at what it is that your product is looking to accomplish, and break that down into bite-sized chunks. Simplify the message. Don't try to tell everyone everything that your product can do in the first few seconds. If you can do that, then you're taking the right step toward delivering a good product. In terms of this timeline, the first step is identifying something that needs to be fixed. So this is just basically the same thing that inventors 100 years ago looked to resolve. That's not always natural, though, to software developers. We think we can just one-up what someone else has done and release our own product. I think fundamentally we need to reconsider, are we really providing something that has true utility value, or are we just trying to have something that we think is cool? If it's truly valuable, there's going to be a whole market that it speaks to. And so if you can boil down what it is, if you can filter down what it is that your product fixes, and you can get this down to one sentence, then at least you have the clarity enough to identify the problem. You will hopefully be able to maintain that same clarity as you can identify a solution. That's the second part. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, because if you're smart enough to build software, you're smart enough to identify ways that you can resolve an issue. I will say that when it comes to user experience design, it's not always the most advanced solution that's necessarily the best. We have a product called Tourist that allows people to go places that they can't immediately go by turning mobile devices like tablets and iPhones into portals. So as you point the device up or down or left or right, it takes you into that space. Fundamentally, there's a paradigm there where most people that don't have a solid foundation in technology will have no idea how it is that we've done that. And I'll give you a demonstration in a second. But from my perspective, being the CEO of the company, I wasn't concerned with the technology early on. I was concerned with, this is the experience that I want to deliver. And that's what commands real value in the software space, is considering first, what is that premium experience, and then concerning yourself with ways to accomplish that. In our circumstance, we were told by many people, this is not possible without a gyroscope. You cannot have this 360-degree panning movement that tracks and displays something in real time on screen. And given an appropriate amount of research and bright minds in the same room, we were able to make that happen. The next step is research. A lot of folks can develop a good product and get it out there and think they're the greatest thing since sliced bread, only to find out that someone else has released a similar product, or a product that perhaps is even better. One of the tricks to being successful in this space isn't just developing something that's good, but presenting it in the right format to the right audience. You may have something that presented in one space will never, ever, ever rise above the noise, but presented to a different audience could be something that they evangelize, something that they're very happy that someone's finally satisfied their pain point. So doing some research early on can be very helpful. It'll also help you identify ways that you may be able to protect yourself from potential competitors in the future. There's a handful of ways you can do this. In my opinion, there are 4. You can do it by securing your intellectual property, and that would mean copyrights, trademarks, trade secrets, patents, things like that. You can do it by securing good relationships. So this would be exclusivity arrangements with other folks that are either potentially partners or customers, so that if someone else tries to enter the space later, they're going to have a more difficult time doing so. To give you an example of this, our product, and I'll show you on I'll show you on my iPhone here. Our product relies on virtual tour imagery. So this is something where the same imagery that you see when you go onto real estate websites and you look around and you can kind of look up and down and left and right and view inside a house, that imagery already exists in abundance. Well, what we've been able to do is go and secure in exclusivity agreements the 3 largest virtual tour image repositories in the United States, which now makes us, we basically handicapped anyone else's ability to go in there. I know that sounds shrewd, and some people don't like that type of tactic, but frankly, that's good business. Anyway, if I'm going to reference this anymore, I thought it would be worthwhile to show you all how this thing just tracks your movement and gives you a window into a space. So here we're in Chicago, but I can load another space, and just as easily we are now, I don't know where we're going to be, we are in a limousine. And so to be able to provide that, that's a truly valuable service that you can offer people, and we've supplemented that with social media sharing tools and you know, powerful map controls, the ability to market one's business. And at every step of the way, we put ourselves in the shoes of our customers, and we try to say what would be most valuable for them. We didn't approach this from a technology perspective. We approached it from a utility perspective. Once you've done enough research, it's time for some initial design. All too often, people will develop a product and then try to skin it and then try to market it, and that is very much backward. Again, I'm trying to encourage you to think of user experience design as one of the primary considerations of product development or software development. So initial design means coming up with a handful of different concepts for a brand that might surround this, a way of telling the story. If you can do that, then what you will hopefully find is you can build a synergy between the software, the technology, hardware even itself, and your branding, such that to the end user, they're inseparable. And good products are very capable of doing that. They sell you as much on the vision and the creativity and the opportunity and the brand that surrounds it as the actual function of using the technology. So if you've performed that initial design, rather than thinking that you've done it right from the beginning, feedback is always important. I pride myself not personally on necessarily putting forth the best ideas constantly, but by surrounding myself with people whose opinions I respect. So if you're able to do that, if you're able to go out and ask everybody's opinions, on occasion, maybe even people whose opinions you don't value, just so you can be aware of what else is out there. For us, we needed to develop a product that was going to be useful in the real estate industry. And I don't mean any disrespect to anybody in that space, but I've heard from a number of realtors, they refer to that industry as a space full of kindergartners, that if you're going to try to release software, you know, it better have one button and only do one thing, because they're not prepared for all that. Now, I'm not saying that's necessarily true.
It is true.
But what we needed to do was make something that was, you know, Staples, easy button, easy. It had to be that simple. And getting that feedback was very helpful for us, because we had all these features we wanted to plug into it. And we couldn't necessarily do that and still maintain a level of simplicity that wasn't going to intimidate people that were new to technologies, even like the iPhone. With that feedback, you can really start to dig in and do things like interface design, information architecture, initial branding. For anyone who's not familiar, information architecture is one of the tenets of good user experience design. What this means is taking the content of your product, whatever it is, be it tangible or virtual, and segmenting that up into something that is palatable, something that consists of a series of steps that you can get more granular in. So in my opinion, a good sitemap doesn't look like this. This is a common sitemap. In my opinion, a good sitemap looks like this. And here's what I mean by this. A good process for a user to follow, be it for a website, a mobile application, or even a tangible product that requires more than one function, is to allow the user at a very simple level to move through the entire necessary process, but at any point in that process to drill down, to get more detail as they want it, not as you're going to force it on them. And that way, hopefully they can get a rewarding experience after about 10 minutes or whatever it is. It's all relative. Could be 60 seconds with your product. But if they wanted to, they could spend an hour with your product and feel that much more enriched. What you'll find is you can evangelize at that point your great grandma, and you can also evangelize, people that really spend a lot of time with technology. With our product, we recently had Adam Curry, formerly from MTV, who did a review on our technology, and he was ranting and raving about it. And he's an awesome guy, and he's a celebrity public figure. Doesn't necessarily know a ton about technology, and so to be able to appeal to him was great. At the same time, to be able to appeal to Chris Pirillo, who does know technology, who runs GnomeDex, who used to be on CNN, it's because we had a product that could keep everyone's interest and not scare anybody away. Then you get into development, and I'm a strong advocate for agile development. I don't think it's possible anymore to compete competitively in a software development space and expect that you can have a timeline laid out 6 or 12 months ahead of you and be able to keep to that. Technologies like Ruby, which I'm a huge fan of, I think the Apple iOS is a very powerful tool set. These allow people to develop very powerful products in a very short period of time. And I would say that to anyone who is working in a team, something that we have just recently started doing in Spark Labs, which is my company, is setting aside a day every 2 weeks where I let the developers do whatever they want to do. And just to give you an example of what that yielded just yesterday, we now have pinch to zoom and high definition retina graphics, not for the interface which we had, but for the actual viewing experience. This is just letting my developers do what they needed to for the day. That sort of thing is very important. Agile development, interpreted very broadly, allows you the flexibility to move toward the same end object, but to get there organically instead of marching and assuming that anything in your path has to be trampled over. You can move around things. And I mentioned this last year in a speech. I'm personally a fan of the 80-20 rule when it comes to development. If you can get 80% of where you need to accomplished with products that already exist or solutions that already exist for 20% of the effort, do it. Don't be this purist that assumes that you have to get 100% of the vision, because you're going to waste so much time and you're going to end up finally having a product that by the time you release it is already antiquated. Then it defeats the purpose. If you combine all these little opportunities that take 20% of your effort but get you 80% where you need to be, well, you're going to end up with a product that's actually competitive and can be released in a timely manner and is probably even profitable, or at least potentially. So once you've developed the product, again, it's back to feedback. This is an opportunity to see, we call it Mike's Grandma Test, because my business partner, his grandma is perfect for identifying whether or not something is easy enough. And if Mike's grandma can get it, then we've succeeded. And if she can't get it, we haven't. But it's all about identifying who it is that who you're running this in front of. In my opinion, the hardest people I could possibly run this by would be my parents. I mean, they'll hold a phone backward and say that the app is not working. So if I can get them to get it to work, then we've really succeeded. And there's a bit of a sort of a backflow here where there's constant iteration. That's to be expected. But it's not necessarily something that we all do, because there are a lot of people that get to this point, they've immersed themselves in the development process for 9 months or whatever it may be, and they have a lot of conviction behind the decisions that they've made. And you'll get to this point, it's very natural, it's very human to get defensive about your decisions. And when a person says, well, I don't get it, it's not what I'm doing, we naturally have this impulse to say, well, did you push that button? Try that. See, it works well. Oh, your vote doesn't count. Okay, what do you think of this? And we can constantly rationalize why people don't get it. But you're doing yourself a disservice if you do that. You really want to listen to the people that you think are idiotic, because we're all idiots about other people's products. I'm an idiot about a lot of them, and frankly, my developers probably all think I'm an absolute idiot, because I come to them daily with questions that infuriates them, but it forces them to reconsider some of the assumptions that they made. Once you get through that and you've made the necessary revisions, then the real fun starts. And in my opinion, the last step here, this could go on in perpetuity, is the marketing, the branding, and really, it's not just the branding of the product, but it's the branding of you. There's probably some of you in this room that have companies or businesses that you participate in that have, let's say, greater than 15 employees. But for everyone else, the following message applies. The senior members of your company are your brand. They are your extension and your face to the world. And personally, although Spark Labs at this point is like 8 people, I am the brand as much as our product is. So I have to be likable in the online space. So that means what I do through Twitter, what I do through any blog posts, what I do in environments like this is a reflection on my product, both directly and indirectly. Directly, it may lend me business. Indirectly, you may find people that want to work with you, or people that are inspired, or people you may be working with years later. And so it's important to be personable, to be cordial. These are things that also don't necessarily come natural to all of us, but it's extremely important. That's my quick aside about personality. But in terms of marketing and branding, there's a few things that you can do that will, in my opinion, still qualify as aspects of user experience design. And some of this is going to be spoken to at 11 o'clock in something I'm doing with Steve Mordew. So, but it would be it's things like making sure that you are listening to your users through feedback forums, marketing your product, and showing the passion that you have about it. We have a video that we put forth recently. We do it for every iteration of our product. And if you're able to have people excited about it, you really need to show that, because the most excited you can possibly be is the most excited anyone's ever going to be about your product. So you need to exploit the heck out of it. Anytime someone's excited about your product, share that with the world. I have 2 Twitter accounts. My personal one, which is still called Spark Labs, which is a bit ironic, and the product one for our new product, which is called Tourist. Spark Labs is something where I don't follow a lot of people. It's still my brand, it's still a reflection of me, but it's something where I'm not constantly exploiting our product. Tourist, on the other hand, is shameless. And I think that's okay. We're using the medium appropriately. So we're following lots of people, we're getting followed constantly, and every time someone says something good about our product, we're letting the rest of the world know about it. And this makes the people feel good. It makes them feel like they're being acknowledged for being evangelists. And it also directly helps because we've got other people who are watching this. In the end, if you've gone from this step onward, it really is even the feedback, because then people can tell that you're listening. For example, we went out to the International Virtual Reality Photographers Association, the IVRPA, recently, and got a lot of feedback, and within a couple of weeks made some significant changes to our product. And that whole community saw that we were actually listening, that we were actually applying changes. They were very, very happy about that. That's in my opinion, that's as much marketing or branding as anything else. If you can combine all of that as you look for your release, as you look towards your release, and then subsequently afterward, what you'll find is that you can build a groundswell. And given how competitive the software market is, with the ease of use of tools like the iOS SDK, you really have to get people on board. So, I wanted to open up for any questions.
With respect to the last thing you said, learning development is actually a function of marketing. You see
It
that
is.
a lot with Android too.
I would posit that all of this, it shouldn't be segmented. All of it is a reflection of you. Even from the very first step, the decision you make on what to fix is going to have a great impact on what it is that, how sexy your brand is. Yes?
How did you get all of the content providers to give you their content exclusively?
Great question.
That was quickly glossed over, but I think that's a key element.
It is, and actually I couldn't be happier that you asked that question. you know, I talked about your personality being a reflection of your brand. I wrote an email that was sincere and carefully crafted, not to look like a marketing message, to look like something a CEO is writing to somebody. And it was written for professional panoramic photographers. And it was carefully crafted where it would try to get your attention in the first paragraph and say, we're respectful of your time, I don't want to bog you down with all the details. And then it provided a series of links. And by doing this, and by acknowledging to the photographers that we had really admired their work, and we did, it wasn't a shallow compliment. What we found was that these photographers came back and said, yeah, I'm willing to give it a try. This is a community which, up until our product, has always been paid to show their work. And now, we're profiting from the work and they're not being paid, but they're doing it because they believe in the product. They believe that this is going to support the whole industry moving forward. So initially it started with a couple hundred tours, and then it was a couple thousand, and we now have contracts inked for 65,000, and as of Friday, we have an agreement which has not yet been inked, so I'm not going to say the name, but it is the largest in the world for that type of imagery that adds another 100,000, which is going to put us at about 175,000 by Christmas. It's going to make us the largest repository on the planet. And this has happened in a series of months just by being nice to people and having a good product that supports that message. So, yes?
What's your website?
Tourist.com. It's tour and then with your wrist. So it's a double entendre. Yes?
I work in the UX space as well, and speaking to the process that you've laid out, which I think is right on the money there. One thing that I've noticed, and I work consulting with other companies to try to bring some UX work in there, is that the process is actually shortcutted in a lot of companies where it's pain remedy, dev, marketing, right? It sort of goes like that.
Absolutely, yep.
And this research, initial design, feedback, design phase, which is sort of the UX preliminary design phase, is left out, and a lot of that's inertia of old processes and stuff like that. How do we inject that intentional exploratory design phase, which is the UX phase, into that process in large companies and small?
As much as it is being a master of your craft in terms of user experience design, anyone who has to work with clients has to be a decent salesperson. And in my opinion, a good tactic for that is identifying what it is that they already respond to. I like to use the Apple analogy because Apple is pretty widely liked these days. And they are one good example of a company that's doing that well. I think Netflix actually does a lot well with their user experience design as well. So if you identify what it is that they do respond to and you can find an example of that, then that example will support your message. Yes?
When, in response to that, might be being in a company where the focus is on time to market, would be iteration. So rather than say don't dev, let's do research, say start development, but build something quickly, show it to people, and then have that iteration be a part of the development process.
Yeah.
If it name by name only, but then you get all that at the same time it's sort of fits.
Yes?
I'm sorry, you were first. Go ahead.
Just a quick question. How do you manage benchmarks? I mean, during the development portion of it and the feedback, how do you manage all that?
It's difficult, it really is. I've had the opportunity to work in the branding and marketing space and in the software development space. In the branding and marketing space, you can set a deadline and you can meet it. In the software space, you can set a deadline and absolutely not meet it. And it's hard to hold developers accountable because they're doing the best they can, and it's an amorphous space. The best thing I can say is that's where Agile comes into play. If you've got this sort of tumultuous path that you've got to get through, then it's about making difficult decisions. The product that we have out right now, 2.0 or 2. Whatever it is, 0.2, is not the product we intended to have out. I would consider this 1.75, but we've got it out there, and most people don't know about the missing features. It's just necessary to not be so hard-lined about your decision making that you hold the product up indefinitely. Yes?
I was going to say, just to kind of piggyback on what you were saying, there's if you want to know more about this, there's a guy, you can Google Steve Blank, and he's built 7 software companies. And he wrote a book, and it's called 4 Steps to Epiphany, and basically it follows this iterative process, just like what Charles outlined. But it's a manual. It really has a lot of good. So Steve Blank is his name, if you want to look it up.
Thanks. Any other questions? Okay, well, if anybody has questions afterward, you're welcome to come talk to me. Thanks, everybody.